Hello and welcome to Drive and Double Feature Podcast. I'm Nathan.
I'm Ryan.
And this is the podcast where we talk about 2 movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. And we have a big event for you today. But before we get into that, head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/Drive and Double Feature Podcast. We have fun games over there. We talk to each other. We fight with each other. We also cry with each other. Be sure to check that out. For $5 a month, you help support the channel, but no main show content is locked behind there. And today we are talking about the last James Bond movie, which is crazy for me to think about, that we made it all the way to No Time to Die from 2021, directed by Cary Fukunaga. Now, he directed Beasts of No Nation. Yes. But yeah, this is our last Bond movie. It's just crazy to look back on this. It's been quite an adventure from the very first one to this last one. That's 25 movies. So that's 25 months of doing this. But it still has breezed right by, because I don't think we've ever repeated a month, and we've even skipped some months. So it's a little bit longer than 25 months as well. I guess let's save the recap. I was going to ask you some questions, but let's save that for the end of this one, and let's just dive into No Time to Die. No Time to Die is a really interesting one because I remember the hype building up for it and seeing trailers in 2019 for this one. COVID hit in 2020, and this movie got pushed out. You wouldn't remember it, you youngster. I had to deal with it. But yeah, that kind of killed the movies for a little bit, and it did come out in 2021. And if I remember right, this was like one of those like, let's get back to the theater people first movies that you could go to the theater and see.
What was the first? I'm trying to even remember what was the first movie I saw like after COVID hit. I think it might have been this one, honestly, for me.
I think it was. I think I remember you texting me that, saying that, like, oh, I took because remember, everyone was just a little scared to go outside at this point. And you're like, yeah, I took the leap and I just went to go see this in the theater. I think I don't remember what my first movie back was. It wasn't this one.
Didn't you go see I thought you went to go see like a couple. Didn't you go see like Onward or something like in
No,
theaters?
Onward was my last movie before COVID. I remember that because this is becoming COVID memories, but I think that's fun. I remember the day getting furloughed from my job, or like they were like, we're closing for a little bit, and then going to the theater, watching Onward, and then after that it was like, oh, we're going on lockdown. I was like, wow, that's my last movie. I think it was New Mutants. I think New Mutants was my first movie coming back. The X-Men horror movie that was really bad.
Oh my God. And you're like, this is it. I don't care if I die, get sick. I have to go see this movie.
I think I just was ready to go back to the movies. God, but I remember we skipped out on Tenet. That was like the big one, if I remember right. That was like,
Yeah.
come back, people. But No Time to Die, after a long wait, it came out, and it is the last Bond from Daniel Craig. So at least for now, he might do a Sean Connery. Who knows? I doubt it, the way he talks about these movies. But this one is a continuation of the plot of Spectre, which I know we were all ready for, really excited for here. So I do like this movie, but I do have a lot of issues with it. It is a movie I do take some issues with, and I say that now because at the beginning of the movie, it already has things that I kind of don't like. And that's like, the bad guy in this movie feels like he just pops up out of nowhere, but it really wants you to think that he's huge and he's been here the whole time, but there's just no build up to it, right? And that's because at the beginning of the movie, we see Madeline as a kid, and this guy goes in and shoots her mom and then takes her outside and is like, attempts to kill her. It's like a big thriller moment. And this is all connected. This is the main bad guy of the movie. And there's just something about them being like, oh yeah, this happened. This is your main bad guy, and you should be scared of him. But I feel like he has no power, right? How do you feel about this?
I mean, we talked about this, I think, at one point where it's just like, uh, like I was almost getting like Rami Malek fatigue at some point.
That's right. Yeah.
And like, because we went to go see that movie Amsterdam, and Rami Malek's in that, and you're like, spoilers for Amsterdam if you haven't seen it, but it's like when you see like now, like when I see Rami Malek on screen, I'm like, oh, so he's the bad guy, and then sure enough, he was like, oh, he was the surprise bad guy this whole time, but um, like I really didn't care for this bad guy that much because
Mhm.
it's very like okay, this is gonna be like the final Daniel Craig movie. I mean, spoiler alert. I mean, it's like you know what's gonna happen at the end of this movie,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you're like, oh God, this guy's gonna be such a big, bad, powerful guy, and it's like he did. I mean, there's just nothing about him that really stands out. I don't really feel like, and I
Yeah.
mean. I mean, he's certainly not the worst one, which I still think the worst one's from Quantum of Solace, but
Because he's actually forgettable,
yeah,
right?
but
Like, I wouldn't call this guy forgettable.
no, I wouldn't call him forgettable, but I just wouldn't call him imposing, I guess, kind of what you're saying. It's just like it's like, oh, like this is like the most brilliant guy ever. He's the one that takes out James Bond. And it's like,
Hmm. And but you
and
don't you
I
don't feel it, right? I
no.
don't know because Malik, he's fine. I don't have any hate for him. I think like he got a lot of hate right after Bohemian Rhapsody because he won that Oscar, which really wasn't deserved. Is he amazing? No, not by any means. But I don't think this villain writing really helps it either. And this is more for later in the movie. It's kind of like Blofeld and Spectre, which is kind of what we talked about before, where he's like hardly in it, and then he's in it a lot at the end. And it's just like I don't know if we're looking for an interconnected story. I wish they would have built to this rather than like just kind of shoehorn it in.
I guess I would have liked to have seen, I mean, especially with this being Daniel Craig's final performance, I would have liked for it to be like more of a personal type of bad
Hmm.
guy. Like, like I know like the whole theme of this one is like, oh my God, they're like because this is like the first movie where it's like the same character as the Bond girl twice in this movie.
Yes, yeah.
So that's the only time this has ever happened where it's like they got the same actress to play the same Bond girl. And
Hmm.
but I would have liked to have seen like a much more personal bad guy. I mean, even when we talked about with Blofeld, I mean, it would have been like I think it might have been kind of good if maybe they reused Blofeld maybe and like made him like the bad guy once
Yeah.
again. Like I know I kind of said, like I Christoph Waltz wasn't my favorite Blofeld, but I would have liked for it to have been like a little more personal, like, oh, like the stakes are really on this one. But in this one, it's just like, okay, yeah, Spectre was a big thing in the last movie, but now all of Spectre's dead.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's some big twist, but like I don't know because well, I guess we'll get there, but that happens in the beginning, and then after that, Bond is the opening title sequence hasn't happened yet. Bond gets a really big action scene, and this is what I like about the movie. The action is shot really well. I do think the action in this movie is really well done, because him and Madeline go to a city to visit the grave of his lover from Casino Royale, because of course that's been a whole theme this whole time, which is fine. I think that's cool that he's dealing with that because obviously he has a weak spot for women. That's like him being able to trust women or
Well,
just
it
trust
wasn't.
anyone in general. He thinks he's set up by Madeline because she sends him to the gravesite. It blows up, and then that's why he goes through the city. It's actually a really great scene because he's in the Aston Martin and his car. He stops it in the middle of the city, and she's just like, "I would never do this. I'm sorry." And Bond just won't talk to her. But eventually, he like spins the car around, and the guns shoot out, and he shoots everybody around. I love to see a car with gadgets on it. Like that's fun. Nostalgia bait aside, I think this is a great choice. But yeah, so that happens, and then he puts her on a train, and it's just like you're never going to see me again. Pretty much cutting everything off between them, and then we get the opening title sequence, which is Billie Eilish's "No Time to Die." Um, I really like this song. I think it's a good song. It's a Bond song, very quiet, and then it goes huge. I feel like it feels classical.
I liked it a lot too. I mean, it I I've listened to this song before, like even like
Mhm.
outside of the movie. It's a really good song. I mean,
Mhm.
I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really enjoy this one. And I like the visuals too. I mean, it's interesting because it's all about guns. For whatever reason, the opening title sequence is all about guns. It does some cheesy things like the pistols shooting at each other to create a
Yeah.
DNA strand. It's at least trying something. I don't know. I'm okay with it. I think it's fine. I think we've seen some pretty bad title sequences up to this point.
It's fine. I mean, they go a little crazy sometimes in the CGI department, but
Yeah.
I don't, it's nothing bad or anything like that. I just feel like we've seen like the whole like, oh, guns are shooting and all that, type
Yeah.
of thing. So yeah, we need to go back to something like can we go back to like girls doing gymnastics or whatever, like their silhouettes?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Or just hell, things projected on women's bodies. Or
Yeah,
you want to change it up, just make it men's bodies. Why not?
who
Um
doesn't like that?
I don't see anybody that would be upset. Except for people would be like, the first woke Bond. They put men in the opening titles.
Well, I mean, they kind of called this movie the a woke Bond a little bit, but
Yeah, they did. Yes, because well, we won't go into that. But yeah, after that, Bond has completely quit, and he is on an island living just his best life. He's kind of cool. He's drinking, and he seems to like the locals, and he's just off the grid. But he is completely alone. But then a return of a character, Felix Leiter, played by Jeffrey Wright, returns, which is great. He's like we've talked about that with Casino Royale, how fantastic he is. Still a great performance. If anything, this movie makes me wish he was in the other ones. I wish they would have kept him for all the movies.
yeah, Felix Leiter. I mean, and all the other movies, like Felix Leiter has been such like, I mean, I hate to be like such a nothing character. Like other than
Hmm.
maybe like License to Kill, where it's like, oh no, they ruined Felix Leiter's wedding or whatever.
Yeah,
Uh,
which
but
they kept
this,
that Felix Leiter.
yeah, well, and apparently, I guess that Felix Leiter, like lost his leg or whatever, but now he's fine.
Yeah,
But I do like in this one, Jeffrey Wright because he's probably like easily the best Felix Leiter out of
yeah.
all the other ones.
No, totally agree. And he has a good character, and you really feel that connection between Bond and Leiter, that they do have camaraderie. They've worked a long time together. And then along with Jeffrey Wright is just like another guy from like the State Department. I think his name is Logan Ash.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he
And
just looks like a total douchebag.
yeah, he's a douchebag. As soon as I saw him, once again, just like the Rami Malek thing, it's like, oh, it's a bad guy. Okay, like I know he's gonna double cross them. But what goes on is that they need to go and save somebody who's defecting, who has like some top secret weapon. So the U.S. asks Bond to go for it, and this conflicts with the new 007 who shows up, and she is also there to do the same thing. So yes, this movie, because that was a huge talking point even before this movie, was who was the next Bond, and then this movie actually gave us a new 007, and it doesn't seem like they are sticking with her. It's Lashana Lynch. Um, so do you add her to the Bond ranking list?
Is this a Bond? Is this her Bond movie?
I don't know. This is kind of her Bond movie. She does later in the movie give up the 007 status.
No, I remember. I mean, I don't know if you wanted to talk about it or not, but I
Why
mean,
not?
but the I remember the news coming out was just like people's like, oh my God, like they are replacing James Bond, like they're replacing Daniel Craig with
Hmm.
a black woman, and they're gonna
Yeah.
and she's gonna be the new James Bond. And I just remember people like freaking out about that, like and
Yeah.
talk, but when you watch it in the context of the movie, it's like, yeah, she's technically the new 007, but she's not in it like it's still
It's not
Daniel
her
Craig's
movie.
movie. Yeah,
No, yeah, it's
it's
not her movie. I like how they even play it because she's like very playful, like, oh, I'm the 007 now. You thought they'd retire it or whatever. And she's during this whole beginning sequence, it's like a fight between both of them to get this guy. So it's almost like she's like almost like a playful bad guy there at the beginning. Yeah, and I think it's just there to serve as like things moved on after Bond, and Bond is definitely just coming back one last time. I don't think this movie was ever setting her up as like this is the new James Bond. It didn't seem like they were going to go forward with her at all.
no, it's if more than anything, it just seemed like a fake out, kind of like, oh, like
Yeah.
they're just gonna replace Daniel Craig, like this is the new Bond. And then when you watch the movie, it's like, oh no, he was the Bond the whole time. And but
I like
but it
that.
remi but it reminds me though, like I said, um, it reminds me back in the Golden Eye. Like, we talked about that, and I still think about that. Like after when we rewatched it, it's
Mhm.
like when Judi Dench is like looking at Pierce Brosnan and just be like, "You're from an old, antiquated, like sexist, misogynist, like
Yeah, I
time," and I'm like, oh my God, if they played that line in this movie, like, can you imagine if like that Bond said it to her, said it to like Daniel
yeah,
Craig, like people
oh,
would
people would
be
be
be flipping out.
it's crazy to me, right? Because that movie's from 95, which is almost 30
Yeah,
years ago. And like they were saying lines like that, and nobody was upset. Almost everybody was like, oh, yeah, you're pretty much right. But now it's
yeah.
like you could never say anything like that without some kind of uproar. But it is what it is. She doesn't say anything quite like that. More, she's more just like, you're an old man.
Well,
Go.
yeah, she's basically just like, hey, like I'm the new 007 and you're really getting in my way because like
Hmm.
you said, MI6 and the CIA both have the same mission. They're trying to capture this scientist that worked at a disease center or whatever. And he was like,
Hmm.
but so they're both trying to acquire him. So she's basically just like, hey, like get out of my way. Like this guy's mine type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So this ends up with probably my favorite sequence of the movie. Is They end up in Cuba, and he meets up with Ana de Armas, who is another spy, and her whole shtick is that she's only been training for 3 weeks, and they put her on this mission with him. So she is like brand new to this. And I don't know, she's really good in this movie. I actually really like the both of them together. I think they work really well together. I mean, they had been in a movie before, but still.
Right. So I don't know. Like I thought the same thing because when I was watching it, even back then I was like, oh yeah, she was really good. But like now watching it, I was like, man, I really wish she was like had like
Hmm.
her own Bond girl status. I mean, technically, I guess she is,
I think people call her the Bond girl of this movie. I
but
know
she's really
Madeline
not.
kind of is, but still.
She's really not though. I mean, she's like she has this one scene really, and that's about
Mhm.
it. But I would have really liked it if she and like Daniel Craig had her own movie.
Yeah, I agree because I think they work well together. Because I think there's just something about the way she plays it where she's like oblivious because he keeps dropping like sexual innuendos way more than usual during that scene where he takes off his suit and he's like, oh, I usually have to work harder to get this off, and she's just like, no, and she turns around, doesn't even notice it. I don't know. I think that's funny. But what happens is they end up at a party, and the gas that's supposed to kill only James Bond kills everybody in Spectre. So everyone in Spectre is dead. Blofeld, who's been giving commands from prison, he's basically been screwed over because somebody else is working towards killing off Spectre. So they defect. Come to find out, Felix Wright's Felix Wright. I just combined them.
Phoenix Wright.
Yeah, Phoenix Wright. Felix Leiter's partner is evil, takes him away, and they blow up the boat that they're on. And um, keep on wanting to say Felix Wright. Felix Leiter dies here, and this is what I meant by like, I wish he was in more movies because I feel like I would have felt the impact of his death more rather than if they skipped 2 movies. Yeah.
Yeah, it just seemed like a little much because you already know what's going to happen at the end of this movie, and it's just like, oh man, they're really just like killing off everybody, aren't they?
Yeah, they're just wanting to end it all. Um, But yeah, so now and then Bond has to, then he goes to MI6 and he gets reinstated. He pretty much has to go up to
M.
M. Sorry, I was thinking. I don't know why I didn't just say M. I was like, oh, I gotta say, I gotta
Ray
say the
Fiennes.
Ray Fiennes name, who is playing M again. It's all the same people. It's Ben Winshaw as Q and Naomi Harris as Moneypenny. Which I think I really like them as a team. I actually, I think I said this last time. Ray Fiennes is just a great actor and continues to be a really good M in this. Mallory. But so he basically Bond has to be like, hey, I know what's going on, and then M has to fight his way. Like basically he fights off Bond at first, but then accepts him back in. Because the thing is Blofeld, who has all the answers, will only speak to Madeline. And of course, Bond is going to freak out about that. But it seems like both of them just don't even talk. But don't worry, they get back to, they're fine later on in the movie. Um, what I think is really interesting about this movie, and I wish they did it earlier. So Bond has like nanobots that kills people of a certain type. He's infected by them, and he ends up choking Blofeld out. And yeah, they do kill off everybody. They kill
Yeah.
Blofeld. Bond literally kills Blofeld from touching him. Which once again, I wish Christoph, like you said, I think Christoph Waltz as the main villain would have been pretty good again. Because he's
It would have
playing.
been a little more personal, I feel like, for Bond.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of just like one scene, they just kill him off. Um, but I wish that from that point on, him touching Madeline would kill him, right? Because they do that later. That like, oh, he gets the bot that
Dude.
will. I did it again. But where he will touch her and kill her. But I feel like if they did it earlier, it would actually add a little more stakes to it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would have liked them to do a little more with it. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not a big fan of like the whole nanobots, like, oh,
But
like
they've
the
been doing that for like
secret.
two movies in a row.
Yeah, like the whole like, oh, this is like you don't know who this is gonna kill.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, God, I do like one little bit where Q is going through his like gadgets, and then one of them is a little tea set. He pulls it out. That felt like classic Q stuff. But oh, and he's waiting for a date. Q confirmed gay in this one. He's waiting for a date from a guy. Wow.
Oh my
Oh
God.
my God. So that's crazy.
Disgusting.
Yeah, is that how you're supposed to react?
No,
Um,
no, no, of course not. No.
just kidding. But God, where does the plot even go from here? Because
He does the scene where like Bond like he like wants to go like face Madeline himself,
yeah,
and come to find out, Madeline has a daughter.
yeah, and she is very insistent at first that that's not his kid. But we all know it's his kid. I,
It's
I
Blofeld's kid.
Yeah, it's Blofeld's kid. See, I don't. This is something else that I'm like a little iffy on. I don't hate it. But it's unnecessary.
Well, like I don't know. I mean, what was your thoughts of Madeline like Inspector though, like as Leia Seydoux, like
So, I think I remember saying I like her, and I do. I don't think she's the most interesting Bond girl. Not even Daniel Craig's most interesting Bond girl. That would definitely be Vesper. And I was gonna say she continues to be fine here. I think it's just more of like as an actress, she's good. Maybe the character just isn't as fleshed out as it needs to be.
I was thinking like I never really thought of her as like the end all be all like Bond
Yeah.
girl. Like, it's like, oh yeah, she was fine, Inspector, but it's like they've kind of dug themselves into a hole because it's like, okay, well, there really wasn't a Bond girl in Skyfall because she got killed. And
Yes. Yeah.
then and the one in um Quantum of Solace nobody remembers or cares about. And then
Yeah.
and it's like so it's like they pretty much had to go with her as like the end all be all. Um
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. I would have preferred like because I know like the whole thing is like this movie's leading up to James Bond's death, and it's supposed to
Hmm.
just be like, okay, like he's done everything he can, he's like he's got like his perfect girl, he's got a kid now and
Hmm.
all that. I don't the whole thing of him like, oh, we got to kill off James Bond. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm not really like that big of a fan of,
Yeah.
because I mean, I know the whole point is like, well, we got to kill him off because Daniel Craig doesn't want to come back, and we're pretty much like having to do that so we don't have to use Daniel Craig again.
Yeah, which is weird because I mean they just ended runs of other Bonds. They could have just let it be, I feel like. But for whatever reason, these are such an they've now become such interconnected stories that I feel like they had to do it. They were, like you said, they dug themselves in the hole. It's like, oh, they're so connected, we can't just leave it hanging.
I guess, but I mean, even at Spectre, it was just him getting into the car and driving off. I mean, that would have, I don't know. I mean, I don't really like the finality of them like, oh, James Bond is dead, but it's because I guess it'd be like a little different if it's, I mean, I don't know. I guess since they're all connected or something, but
Yeah. I just
I'm
don't
just,
know. I personally think the connectedness is what I don't love about this movie, right? I don't they I like some connections. I don't
yeah,
mind it, but what I like about classic Bonds as we've gone through them all, and I now can definitively say this, I like the classic Bonds because they had nothing to do with each other. It was like picking up a new book, you understand James Bond, and then you get everything else new. That's what's fun about it. And like I'm not saying these movies are bad. Daniel Craig happens to have one of the best Bond movies, but the connectedness just kind of like it feels like it's forced. It's forced.
it does. And that's the part, like I said, like where they really just dug themselves in a hole. It's like, okay, well, we did this, so we have to mention these relationships that have happened before, and we have to
Mhm.
keep them all connected, which, even goes back to being like, because like the other movies, they had like a very, very light connectedness to it. Like,
Mhm.
Blofeld was in it, but it wasn't like he was aware of Bond. It wasn't like, oh my God, I have to go kill Blofeld for this specific reason
Mhm.
or anything. So I guess I would have, and, they mentioned Tracy and all that because they
Yeah.
mentioned like, oh, like you used to be married, I know, and then he'd be like, don't talk about that type of thing. So
And that would be it. That'd be like the
yeah,
one thing. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think whenever they do the new James Bond, whenever because they'll eventually do it, they
I
I
think
have
they
a
should just start over.
well, I think I think that they should do like a maybe episodic thing, kind of like the old ones, but that's what I want. They won't do that. I think in a post-Marvel world where every piece of franchise media has to be interconnected, we'll never see anything like that from Bond again.
You're watch like there's gonna be like they're gonna have like the end of a James Bond movie where like James Bond like walks in and it's like a room, and then all of a sudden like Tom Cruise is like Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible is like, hey, I got a mission for you.
Hey, I would that I would be for. I would James Bond versus Ethan, or they work together or they fight against each other. Both would be pretty cool.
I just I
I
get
think Ethan
I
Hunt would win.
you think
I think so. I think I do. I do.
oh my gosh,
Wait,
maybe.
you don't agree?
I don't James Bond's killed a lot of people. Ethan Hunt
Yeah,
hasn't killed that many people.
that's true. He doesn't really kill that many people.
Um anyway, we're gonna get off a really
Oh
long
yeah,
side
wow.
tangent.
Yeah, this is
But
kind of crazy.
but no, going back to it, it's like he walks in and he finds out she has a daughter, and it's like, oh my God, like this she's yeah, like you said, it's like this is not your kid, but it's very obviously like even like the
Mhm.
audience knows, like, yeah, that's James Bond's kid. So
Yes. Yeah.
and it kind of just leads into like they end up getting kidnapped in this snow car chase scene.
Yeah, yeah, and this is a side thing, but I hated this car chase scene. I think it's fun, but there's this is a small detail. I'm gonna sound like a real big nitpicky guy, but there's like CGI dirt
Ding.
trails. It's a ding. the cars running on, there's just CG dirt just flying everywhere. It does not fit. I thought it looked really bad. But otherwise they like end up in like the forest, and like Madeline has to hunker down in like the trees or whatever while Bond runs out and kills people, which is kind of cool. It's more of like a guerrilla warfare Bond. He does like that thing
Yeah.
where he puts the wire between the tree and it knocks out the motorcyclist. Like I said, the action all looks pretty good in this movie. Um, but they when it all comes down to is everybody gets together and they figure out where the secret base is at. So they go over there. And not only are the stakes of James Bond's life on the line, right? His kid is there and his kid could die. Not only that, they have a plane in the sky, and all the nations of the free world want to know what are they up to. Oh, and guess what? You got to nuke this island. That's what Bond says. So it's like
Yeah.
all of these things stacking up on each other. It's
Eh,
just huge.
Like these insurmountable odds, like that are even impossible for like James Bond to overcome.
Yeah. And but I do like it because it is the return of kind of like a big secret base. It's like underground. It's an old like bunker, but still, and it's like a farm, and they're like farming stuff in there. And
This is my poison garden.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And this is when you see the most of that character at the end of the movie when you feel like it's
Yeah.
wrapping up. Because let me say, this is a long movie. I feel like I've skipped over a lot because it's just a long one. This is a 2 hour, 40-minute movie. I think it's one of the longest of the
I think
bunch.
it is the longest.
It is, yeah. That
So I
makes
think the
sense.
next closest one was like 220 or like 2 hours and 20 minutes or something. But
That's crazy. They really were. This really is like the big ending one. Um, but yeah, so they end up down there, and there's a giant shield blocking everything, and then Bond has to open up that door to allow the nuke in because what's in there is a bomb that could literally kill everyone in the world. Like, let me tell you, these stakes are like I already said it. Didn't even mention this part that he's developing a weapon that has DNA killers that can kill everyone in the world. It's it's like the world domination plot kind of deal. Except like what's his reasoning? The world hurt him, so he wants to hurt it back.
yeah, pretty much.
Very classy, very classy. um I guess whatever. That actually sounds like something Rami Malek would do.
Yeah, the world hurt me, so I hurt them. Well, I mean, there was like a lot of like the whole like like 007 ends up coming to like the female 007
Hmm.
ends up like coming to terms with like starting to respect him because at first she's very adversarial to him and just very much just like I don't like this guy, but once once she finds out they like Madeline and her daughter are kidnapped, she's like, "Oh, I didn't know that you had a daughter or whatever." And
Hmm.
um then they do like the whole bit where like James Bond gets reinstated as 007,
Yes.
and then they go to the island, and eventually they do go there, and like they're starting to kill everybody. Like the female 007 has like this one like really violent scene or whatever where she's like that remember like that lowly scientist guy who's like, "Oh
Yes,
no,"
yeah.
he's like, "No, no, please don't kill me," and she's like, "Time to die," and just like kicks him into that vat of
Well,
acid, and he's like,
well,
"Ah."
that's because what he says before, he says like, "Oh, I have something that could wipe out your entire race," and she was like, "All right, no time, you're gonna die, buddy." But that's not the first time she's violent to him, because like he's just like yapping, and then she's
Yeah,
like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting tired of this guy," and Bond goes, "Well, shut him up." And he slaps him in the face with her gun. Um,
which I mean, it's deserved. He's evil, but
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. But they do all escape. I think it's the one scene is funny where Rami Malek's about to run away because he's going to kidnap their child, and the child doesn't want to go with him, and he's like, "Well, if you don't want my protection, you can go." And then she just walks away. Yeah, she just leaves, and Rami's just like, "All right." And then she finds her way back to Madeline, and they
I
leave.
didn't understand that bit.
I don't either, and I think that's such a boring way. Like Bond couldn't have fought to get the child. They were like, well, how can we get the kid out of here easily? The bad guy can just let her go.
Well, because especially because they had like this big standoff, like at one
Uh-huh.
point where like Bond is holding, he like points a gun at Rami Malek, but Rami Malek's got like the kid,
Hmm.
basically just like, I'm going to kill her with my bare hands if you don't let's do everything I say. And he's like, yes, yes, of course. And then
Hmm.
after that scene is over, she's like, no, I don't wanna. And then it's like, okay, then go. And then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's very boringly done. Bond has to stay behind and he fights the bad guy, kills him pretty easily, breaks his arm in the water, and he's dead. But Bond can't leave the island. He has to stay there, leave the door open for them to nuke, and he's gonna die from explosion.
Well,
Yeah.
not only that, but
Oh yes, yeah.
he got, well, because they're like, okay, well, you can just open the door, Bond, and then you'll be safe. And he's like,
Hmm.
nope, been poisoned
Yeah.
because because Rami Malek poisoned him like before he died.
Yeah.
And so I mean that's like they had to like just stack the odds just like so high against him. It's just like, okay, well, like even if he survives a nuke somehow, he's poisoned. So,
Yeah. I'm realizing just how like stacked up this movie is. It's almost to a silly degree. I always loved this is a side tangent. I always love talking about movies on here because it makes me realize like my opinions on it. Because I feel like sometimes it's easy to leave a movie and be like, yeah, I like that. But when you talk about it, you start to go like, oh, maybe there was more wrong with this movie than I realized.
it's a very it's not a perfect Bond movie.
No,
It's
it is entertaining though. I would never say
it's
this
not a
movie's
bad
not. Yeah,
yeah, it's not a bad Bond movie. That's not what I want to say, but it's not the best either.
it's not perfect. It is an upgrade from Spectre. I will say for a
I
final
agree.
Bond movie, it's better. It's better than Spectre Quantum of Solace. It at least got that done. So I will say that. But yeah, the Bond dies in the end, and then but it's like so cheesy. Like it's a little too cheesy of Q on the mic, and it was like, and then Bond's like, "Oh, I've been poisoned. I'm gonna die." And he's like, "Well, I got to get Madeline on the line." And then they have a heartfelt conversation, and Q's listening in, and he's crying, listening to their personal conversation.
And then Tuesdays arrives. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think it'd be funny if Q was maybe bisexual and then hooked up with her. It was like, hey, I know you're sad about
hey,
Bond.
hey, so single now, huh?
Yeah, there we go. And I don't mind kids. I love kids even. But it's not like that. But um so and then even cheesier, the end of the movie is Madeline and his daughter riding off into the sunset, and Madeline's like, let me tell you the story about James Bond. And it's like, oh wow.
Let me let me tell you the story of a man named Bond, James
Yeah.
Bond.
Yeah. And then the song choice is good. It's the song from On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
All the time in the world. Yeah, that
Yeah.
I actually thought that was a really nice touch.
Yes, yeah, that's like we
Hmm.
we like Bond movies touch, like like it wraps it all together.
Yeah, I really loved the way how it ended because like that movie, like when they played that song at the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, that was after this big like dramatic moment for Bond type of
Yeah.
thing. And so in this one it's like it's a nice kind of closing for the character with this song.
No, and I totally agree. And it wraps it up. And like we said, it's entertaining. This movie is not perfect. It has its issues, but I will at least say I had fun with it. I think the action scenes are good. Daniel Craig is putting in a good Bond as usual. He is a very good Bond. At the end of this run, I will say that. I do like him as that character.
Yeah, it's still a good recommend for me.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say definitely check it out. I recommend it.
Um, but will Bond return?
We don't have a Bond return. We don't even know who the next Bond is. I'm hearing so many. I'm hearing the guy from Challengers, Josh O'Connor. I'm hearing about
Really?
Kick-Ass. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've heard Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Yeah, that's like the big one. But recently, I've been seeing Josh O'Connor, which would actually be a pretty cool pick. I think that would be interesting. Very young Bond, but and then 5 years later, they're gonna have him being like, "Oh, you're old and broken, Bond."
Yeah, by like the third movie, it's like we need someone even better, and it's like someone from Gen Alpha or something like
Oh
that.
my God, I couldn't
I
even imagine. Um, but yeah, so I mean that wraps it up for the Bond series, at least movie wise. But we do have to kind of recap a little. Maybe we have a few questions for each other, talk about everything. I feel like we've done this for a while, but let's talk a little bit about ranking. So we decided that a full ranking of all these movies would take a while, a lot of discussion. So we're actually going to have that over on our Patreon. So be sure to look over there if you are interested in seeing like a full ranking of everything. We're also going to rank all the songs over there too. But for here, we are going to go ahead and rank the Daniel Craig movies because we do go through and rank all of the different Bond ones. All right. So, Ryan, let's start with the worst one. And I feel like our rankings are going to be pretty similar.
Mhm.
The worst one for me, Quantum of Solace. Just a completely forgettable bad movie. It's actually I think my least favorite Bond movie.
I don't know if it's my, well, it might be my least favorite,
Yeah,
but
Never
it's,
Say Never is very maybe worse, I think.
well, I mean, if we're going, if you're including that one, then it would be, I mean, no question. Well, we'll talk about that later, but
Yes, yeah.
but yeah, no, easily out of the Daniel Craig ones, Quantum of Solace is probably my least favorite. I mean, just a horrible bad guy. Like I just
Yeah.
like I did not care one thing about this bad. And remember too, like he had an off-screen death too,
Yes.
even, and and just like I didn't care about the chemistry between Bond, and it's just a really just big slog of a movie,
Which is crazy because it's the shortest one.
and it felt like the longest one. So yeah, that would be my least favorite Daniel Craig one.
No, and I exactly mirror what you said. But what would be your next one up?
Right. My next one would be Spectre.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
it's not necessarily the worst Daniel Craig, like I said. It's just there's so much more they could have done, and to think like they're like this one was going to be like the final Daniel Craig James Bond movie at one point is like crazy to think. Like it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, like what a sour ending to like the to your
Yeah.
to your reign. But I just think Blofeld wasn't entirely interesting. It felt very rushed and
Mhm.
was not really a huge fan of this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think yeah, Spectre is my next one up too as well. Yeah, there's things to like about the movie, but also it just has too many issues, Blofeld being one of them. Um, it's trying to do all the Bond cliches, but like then again, it also just felt like a cliched movie. Um, just I don't know. I just looking back on that one, very mixed. Next one up
Hmm.
for me is No Time to Die. Would be the next one up. Much better movie than Spectre. This is a huge jump between good stuff. Pretty much everything we said. I just think there's some cheesy moments. Maybe it's too forced on being a connected story, but still a really solid action-packed movie.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's flawed, but it's not the worst one by any means. It's there's some decent action in there and some memorable moments, but overall, like I pretty much just mirroring what I just said. I was like, I really wouldn't. I really think they kind of like dug themselves into a hole with a lot of the like themes and stuff. It's like, oh, it's like we have to do this because it's the final movie type of thing. So we got to kill
Mhm.
everybody.
No,
But
yeah, too much.
so it's it was a good movie, but I wish it didn't end on that.
Yeah, I get that. What's next? What's the second best?
This one's hard because I could easily my top two could easily change,
Hmm.
but my gut is telling me that I am putting Casino Royale is number two.
I'm doing a spit take. No, I get it because both of these are really good movies, but this is where we differ. Skyfall would be
Okay.
my number two.
Okay. Well, I mean, like I said, like I could probably change on this to be quite honest. Like if I watched
Hmm.
Casino Royale right now, that might be my number one. But going back, I remember when we watched it for the series, I remember just watching Casino Royale and be like, man, this movie's a lot better than I remembered it. It's like
Hmm.
it was very much like, I remember it being good, but when I was going back and watching, just thinking back to like all the memorable moments, like the poker scene was amazing. It was like one of the most tense scenes of a movie,
Hmm.
and just like the great moments of like how emotional like Bond was and how attached he got to Vesper. Just some really great stuff in there that I really loved a lot. And that would probably easily like in the top, like in the upper tier of like all the Bond movies put together, even.
No, yeah, I agree. Both of these are just really good movies. Skyfall's my number two. Um, just it's a really solid movie. I might have said that I didn't love the ending of that one, but I think everything building up to it is just really solid. Doesn't even have a Bond girl, and it's still like it still rocks it. I think Bond is at his best here. Just visually really striking. Just a really gripping story too. I don't know. Yeah, Skyfall is my number two for good reasons. I put Casino Royale above it because something about Casino Royale is like slowness, but like really like it just really it's tense and slow. And that game it really builds up. Vesper's great. That everything after the casino game is fantastic.
With Chief too, I didn't mention him. Yeah.
The action is just like top notch. Now, Casino Royale is just like it's the return to form for the franchise that it needed, and going through all of these like in a row, it was such a nice pop up after a couple bad Pierce Brosnan movies.
Well, yeah, because after all the Pierce Brosnan ones that were so like cartoonish, like to like
Yeah.
that it was a nice change of pace.
Hmm.
Well, again, so my favorite number one for Daniel Craig would be Skyfall. I really loved the story of Skyfall, just like the personal nature of it, like dipping
Hmm.
into like Bond's childhood, and like you actually go and you actually see like the manor he grew up in. I
Hmm.
love the visuals, even though like they don't go to like any like super crazy locations in this one, like that's mostly set in the UK,
Hmm.
and like just like the fogginess of like the area they were at. That I
Yeah.
love the visuals of that. I loved how simple the story is. Javier Bardem, I think, was a great Bond villain too.
Yeah, it's crazy they never brought him back.
I know. So I would have, I, I mean, this one to me, like I've seen this Daniel Craig one multiple times, so I would place this one as my number one Daniel Craig.
Nice. All right. Well, that ends it for that ranking. But Ryan. All right. Let's rank the bonds. Let's rank the bonds,
Oh,
okay?
the actors?
Yeah, the Bond actors. Let's do that,
Okay.
right? All right. So I guess we would start at the bottom. Who was the worst Bond? So let me get like like a list. So we got Timothy Dalton,
David
Sean
Nevin.
Connery, David Nevin. God. Yeah, okay. So I like that because then we don't have to say like an actual like decent Bond is the worst.
Well,
Because here's the thing, there
actually,
is no bad Bond in my opinion.
no, that's the problem. I mean, I wouldn't say any of the Bonds were bad. Uh,
Yeah. I For me, I would say by default, I would put George Lazenby on the bottom. I do really like him, but he just never got the chance to really show off his chops. I feel like a second movie with him could have been great, but yeah, just the one movie, you just not enough really.
yeah, I mean, he would be at the bottom, but that's not his fault, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
It's it's very much just like he couldn't be in more movies or he didn't want to be. So I think though, if we would have gotten more of his, because like I said, like he has like probably one of my favorite performances of James
Mhm.
Bond, with him and the chemistry he has with Tracy, is was
Yeah.
really good. So if it were if he had a little like a couple more movies in him, I think he definitely would have gotten up the rankings a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. All right. I guess next, man, this is harder than I thought. Um, because everything I'm about to say feels wrong. It's between Pierce Brosnan or Timothy Dalton. Which ones would
Same.
go there? Maybe Pierce Brosnan, then Timothy Dalton. And I do really like Pierce Brosnan, but Timothy Dalton really had like something different amongst everybody that I really liked.
I agree. So I would probably put Pierce Brosnan too. And so I this is going to go against everything I said on like when we talked about Pierce Brosnan as a James Bond, because
Yeah.
when I think of James Bond, like visually, I think of Pierce Brosnan. Like when you say like what does James Bond look like? Like for me, it would be
Mhm.
like looks like Pierce Brosnan
Yeah,
probably.
that's what I
But
would say too. Yeah.
so, but he it's a very inconsistent Bond. It's
Mhm.
so it's like he was in four of them, and two were we both really liked, but two were both pretty bad in my opinion. And
Mhm.
so I would probably put him at number four, and then I would put Timothy Dalton at oh, never mind. He'd be, I'm getting my numbers. Timothy Dalton would be at number five, right?
Right? No, wait, hold on. Sean Connery, Roger Moore, George
More
Lazenby,
than
Timothy
B.
Dalton, Pierce Brosnan, Daniel Craig. Okay, yeah, so six. So we did
So,
six, five, four.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. George Lazenby, then Pierce Brosnan, number five, and then number four is Timothy Dalton. Barry, like you said, had, I mean, two really good Bond movies. So, I mean,
Yeah,
technically, he never turned in a bad performance.
you're
And
right. It was both hits.
so I would have loved to have seen more of him too. I mean, he's very much like a much grittier Bond. So I would have liked to have seen that more, but um, doesn't surpass the other three.
Yeah, no. And then this might be the most controversial take. I'm not sure. I think my number three is going to be Daniel Craig. I think that's going to be my number three. This is like really tough to put up there because Daniel Craig is just all around a great Bond actor. He's one of the few Bonds where like I feel like a bad Bond movie, he still at least put in something good there. I still think, except for maybe Quantum. But I don't know. I just feel like it's more of the other two have more of a lasting power in my mind of like what a bond is.
Yeah, I would agree. I've put Daniel Craig. I loved, it's more of like an emotional type of Bond. The only thing I don't like about the Daniel Craig one is they go for like a lot of the same themes. It's like, oh, he's gonna lose control or get angry or do
Yes.
something, and it's like, and they did that theme I think like three times in this series, and
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, and it got kind of old at a certain point. But as a character, I did like him as a Bond, and I do think he definitely holds his place.
Yeah. But I'm gonna ask you this. Who is the best Bond? Who goes in at number two? Who goes in at number one? Roger Moore or
Uh,
Sean Connery?
Number one would probably be Woody Allen. Um,
Yeah, well, he is good. He is a good Bond. Better than both of them.
as Jimmy Bond.
Yeah, Jimmy Bond.
No, I gotta pick him. It's Sean Connery for me. I
It's
mean,
easy. Yeah.
I mean, but I don't want to discredit um, Roger Moore at all, because probably like throughout this journey, the thing that I learned the most is just like how much I appreciated um, Roger Moore in this
Mhm.
series. Because, it's like I always remembered him being like pretty good, but then when you go back and watch him, it's like, no, yeah, he's really good. So,
I
like,
think I think I like him a lot because he might be the most unique of the bunch. And at least to me, he stands out as something. He brings his Bond character is very different, very silly, very light. He doesn't like we talked about continuing themes. All the other ones seem to have similar themes. Roger Moore's is just something completely different, and I think that's something to be appreciated. The humor he brought to the character.
Yeah, it's definitely what the series needed at the end of like from the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. But Sean Connery is just the best. He's the man. When I think of Bond, as far as a character goes, I think of Sean Connery. Just I don't know. There's just something about his presence that's perfect. They picked the perfect man to play him at the very start.
I mean, as sleazy of a character as he is in some of these
Hmm.
movies, like I love some of the interactions that he has with people. Like,
Yes.
just just his witty dialogue, or
Hmm.
just like I think about the one where it's in Goldfinger, and he meets Pussy Galore, and she's like, "My name is Pussy Galore," and he's like, "Oh, I must be dreaming." And it's just, and so, or just a lot of that type of stuff where like I think he is just such a great Bond, and he's my Bond where I think of like a James Bond, that's the one that I always think of the most.
Yeah, yeah, and I totally agree with that. But I think we've talked about Bond for a lot. If you want to see everything or hear everything else, a real breakdown, be sure to check out our episode over on Patreon. But Ryan, what are we talking about on Thursday?
Oh, that's right. We have another one. We're going to be talking about 1970s Space Amoeba, and that is streaming over the Criterion channel right now.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to watch that one. And if you want to email us, you can email us over at driveanddoublefuturepodcast@gmail.com. And be sure to check out our Patreon. But until next time.
Until next time.